The dense atmosphere of Kzar Prime hung like a heavy veil as Captain Elena Travers stepped off the landing ramp of her shuttle. Her boots sank slightly into the soft, mossy ground, and the air carried a strange mix of earthy richness and a metallic tang. Ahead of her stretched the Kzarran stronghold, a massive fortress carved into the side of a jagged mountain. The structure was both imposing and alien. Its sharp, interlocking spires seemed more like natural rock formations than intentional architecture. Elena adjusted the strap of her field pack and took a deep breath. She was no stranger to alien worlds, having served as a diplomat for nearly a decade. But the Kzarran were different. Their reputation as one of the galaxy's most formidable predatory species preceded them. Towering, reptilian, and fiercely territorial, they rarely sought alliances. Yet here she was, representing humanity in the hopes of forging a fragile peace. Flanked by 2 Kzarran escorts, Elena entered the stronghold's grand hall. The air inside was cooler but no less oppressive. The walls shimmered faintly, reflecting the bioluminescent light emitted by clusters of glowing crystals. The Kzarran leaders waited at the far end of the chamber, seated on thrones carved from volcanic rock. Their scales glistened like polished armor, and their golden eyes fixed on her with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Elena Travers, rumbled a deep voice from the central throne. It belonged to High Warlord Vrazdar, the most influential of the Kzarran Council. His claws tapped against the armrest of his seat as he studied her. "You are smaller than I expected for one who claims to represent an entire species." Elena suppressed a smile. She had learned long ago not to let comments about human frailty rattle her. "Size does not determine strength, Warlord Vrazdar," she replied evenly. "I stand here on behalf of humanity to propose a partnership that could benefit us both." The council murmured among themselves, their guttural language a low hum of suspicion and debate. Before Elena could continue, a sudden commotion interrupted the proceedings. A piercing roar echoed through the hall, followed by the clatter of claws on stone. One of the council members leapt to their feet, their posture tense. "A Stracker beast has breached the perimeter," they hissed. The Kzarran guards near the entrance scattered as the beast charged into view. It was massive, easily the size of a small shuttle, with sinewy limbs and jagged, glistening fangs. Its eyes burned with primal fury, and its spiked tail lashed wildly, leaving deep gouges in the stone floor. Amid the chaos, Elena spotted movement near the creature's feet. A young Kzarran cub, no taller than her waist, had wandered into the hall. Its scales were a lighter shade of green, and its wide, frightened eyes darted between the adults and the beast. "Jatar," one of the council members shouted, their voice laced with panic. The cub froze, paralyzed by fear. The Stracker beast roared again, its attention now fixed on the small, vulnerable figure. The council members hesitated, their instincts to protect clashing with the knowledge that intervening might provoke the creature further. Elena didn't think. She acted. Dropping her pack, she sprinted toward the cub. The Stracker's attention shifted to her as she placed herself between it and the cub. Her heart pounded, but she kept her breathing steady. Slowly, she reached into her pack and pulled out a small device, a sonic repeller designed for such emergencies. The Stracker hesitated, its growl deepening as it sized up this unexpected challenger. Elena activated the device, and a high-pitched pulse filled the air. The beast recoiled, shaking its head as if to rid itself of the noise. Seizing the moment, Elena scooped up the cub in her arms. Its claws dug into her jacket, but she didn't flinch. She backed away slowly, keeping the sonic device pointed at the Stracker until she reached the safety of the council's guards. As the beast retreated, the hall fell silent. The Kzarran council stared at her, their expressions unreadable. Elena set the cub down gently, brushing dirt from her knees. The cub looked up at her, its wide eyes filled with a mix of awe and confusion. High Warlord Vrazdar rose from his throne, his gaze fixed on Elena. "You risked your life for a cub that is not your own," he said, his voice low and measured. "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Elena replied simply. "In humanity, we protect those who cannot protect themselves, whether they are ours or not." The council exchanged glances, their skepticism tempered by a hint of newfound respect. Vrazdar stepped forward, his towering form casting a long shadow over Elena. He studied her for a moment longer before nodding. "Perhaps humans are not as weak as we thought," he said. The meeting resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. Elena's act of courage had planted the first seeds of trust, though she knew the road ahead would not be easy. As she caught the cub's curious gaze once more, she realized she had gained an unexpected ally, and perhaps a chance to show the Kzarran what humanity was truly capable of. The Kzarran cub, Jatar, clung to Elena's side as she was led to temporary quarters within the stronghold. The room, carved from the mountain's heart, was Spartan but functional, with walls that glimmered faintly in the dim light of bioluminescent crystals. She glanced down at the cub, who was inspecting her with curious golden eyes, its earlier fear replaced by cautious fascination. "This arrangement is temporary," High Warlord Vrazdar growled, his massive frame looming in the doorway. "You saved Jatar, but your methods and influence will be closely observed. Kzarran cubs are not raised with softness. Do not make it weak." Elena met his gaze evenly. "Empathy isn't weakness, Warlord. It's a strength you've yet to fully understand." Vrazdar gave a dismissive snort and left, leaving Elena alone with Jatar. The cub chirped softly, drawing her attention. "You're curious, aren't you?" she said, crouching to its level. "Let's start with something simple." She opened her field pack and pulled out a handheld holoprojector. Activating it, she displayed a rotating image of Earth. Jatar's eyes widened, and it reached out tentatively, its small claws brushing the hologram. Elena smiled. "That's my home. A place with oceans, forests, and creatures very different from yours." Jatar chirped again, its tail flicking in excitement. Over the next several days, Elena's relationship with Jatar deepened. The cub, initially wary, quickly grew attached to her presence. Unlike the distant parenting style of the Kzarran, Elena's nurturing approach intrigued and confused the Kzarran elders. She played games with Jatar, teaching it problem-solving skills through puzzles and cooperative tasks. She shared stories of Earth's history and its creatures, using holograms to illustrate her words. In one memorable session, she introduced Jatar to Earth's big cats, tigers, lions, and cheetahs. The cub's fascination was immediate. "They are like us," Jatar said in a halting attempt at her language, its voice high-pitched but determined. "In a way, yes," Elena replied, smiling. "They're strong, but they also care for their young, just like you're cared for." Jatar tilted its head. "But not alone?" "No," Elena said gently. "Humans and many Earth creatures raise their young together. That's how we survive." This idea baffled the Kzarran elders, who observed from a distance. To them, survival was individualistic, with cubs expected to prove their worth early. Some council members, like Vrazdar, began to respect Elena's methods, while others viewed her influence as dangerous. Not everyone was pleased with this growing bond. One evening, Elena overheard two Kzarran elders debating in harsh whispers. "The cub mimics her too much," one hissed. "It speaks her language, adopts her softness. This will weaken our future leaders. We should intervene before her influence spreads further," another growled. Elena's heart sank, but she kept her expression neutral as she slipped away. She knew she was walking a fine line between trust and suspicion. Despite the tensions, Jatar flourished under Elena's care. It began to exhibit behaviors unfamiliar to the Kzarran: playfulness, curiosity, and a willingness to collaborate. When Elena demonstrated human problem-solving by constructing a simple trap for a nuisance insect, Jatar eagerly copied her, adapting the design to catch a smaller, faster creature. The elders, watching this unfold, couldn't deny the cub's growing ingenuity. Yet, for every sign of progress, whispers of dissent grew louder. Elena knew the road ahead would not be easy, but as Jatar nestled beside her one evening, its small form radiating trust, she resolved to see the mission through. For the first time, humanity had planted the seeds of change in a species that had long resisted it. Whether those seeds would flourish or wither remained to be seen. Elena stood in the grand hall, the same chamber where she had first encountered the Kzarran Council. Today, the atmosphere was charged with tension. High Warlord Vrazdar loomed at the center, flanked by the other council members. Jatar sat at Elena's feet, its golden eyes darting nervously between her and the towering figures. "The council has decided," Vrazdar announced, his deep voice echoing off the cavernous walls. "Your methods with the cub have yielded results we did not anticipate. Jatar has grown in both intellect and adaptability. But questions remain about the true strength of these human ways." Elena folded her arms, bracing herself. "And how do you intend to answer those questions?" Vrazdar's claws tapped against the stone floor. "A trial. Jatar will face a traditional test of strength and survival, a rite every young Kzarran must endure. However, as you are its temporary caretaker, you will accompany it." Elena's eyes narrowed. "Accompany? What does that entail?" "You will face the trial together," another council member explained. "You will not interfere directly, but your presence will be a factor. If Jatar falters due to your influence, the consequences will be clear." Elena glanced down at the cub. It looked up at her, its expression a mix of excitement and fear. She crouched, placing a reassuring hand on its shoulder. "We'll get through this," she said softly. The trial's arena was a dense, alien jungle nestled within a massive crater. Towering trees with spiraling trunks stretched toward the sky, their branches dripping with bioluminescent vines. The air buzzed with the sounds of unseen creatures, some predatory, others prey. Jatar stood at the starting line, its small frame dwarfed by the environment. Elena followed close behind, her every step measured. She couldn't intervene directly, but she could guide and encourage the cub. The first challenge was immediate. A pack of skittering creatures emerged from the underbrush, their sleek bodies covered in chitinous armor. They hissed, forming a loose circle around Jatar. "Watch their movements," Elena whispered, standing just behind the cub. "They're testing you. Show them you're stronger." Jatar hesitated, then let out a low growl. The skittering creatures paused, seemingly startled by the sudden display of confidence. Jatar seized the moment, swiping at the nearest one with surprising precision. The pack scattered, disappearing into the underbrush. "Good," Elena said, her voice steady. "You can do this." The trial continued with escalating challenges. A river filled with razor-finned fish, a maze of thorny vines that emitted a paralytic toxin, and finally, a climb up a steep, crumbling cliff face. At every stage, Jatar relied on its instincts but also drew from what Elena had taught it. At the cliff, when the rocks began to crumble beneath its claws, Jatar hesitated. Elena, standing at the base, called out, "Find the stable path. Look for the patterns, like the puzzles we solved." Jatar paused, scanning the rock face before choosing a new route. It climbed steadily, reaching the summit just as the sun dipped below the horizon. At the end of the trial, the council awaited their return. Jatar stood tall, its chest heaving but its eyes alight with pride. Elena walked a few steps behind, her own heart pounding with relief. High Warlord Vrazdar stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over Jatar before settling on Elena. "The cub has passed," he said, "and your influence has proven unconventional, but effective." Elena knelt beside Jatar, meeting its gaze. "You did this, Jatar. You proved your strength and your wisdom. I'm proud of you." The cub chirped softly, leaning into her touch. For the first time, a murmur of approval rippled through the council. Even Vrazdar's expression softened, if only slightly. But Elena knew this was only the beginning. The Kzarran had seen the potential of humanity's methods, but whether they would fully embrace them remained uncertain. Still, as Jatar stood tall beside her, Elena felt hope that the bonds they had forged could withstand whatever trials lay ahead. Weeks passed since the trial, and Elena found herself at the center of growing tensions and subtle shifts within the Kzarran stronghold. Jatar had become a symbol of curiosity and debate among the Kzarran people. The cub's successful trial, and its unorthodox reliance on human teachings, sparked a divide. Some elders whispered of compromise and weakness, while others began to consider the possibility that humanity's ways might complement Kzarran traditions. Elena was summoned to the council chamber once again, this time under less formal circumstances. High Warlord Vrazdar stood alone at the head of the hall, his gaze focused on the glowing map projected before him. It depicted the Kzarran territories and the encroaching zones of the Scraith, a hostile species known for raiding border settlements. Captain Travers, Vrazdar began without turning to face her, his voice heavy with contemplation. You have proven that humanity's methods can yield unexpected results. But the question remains, can they hold in the face of true conflict? Elena approached cautiously. You're talking about the Scraith. Vrazdar nodded. They strike our borders without warning, taking what they want and leaving devastation behind. The Council believes brute force is the only way to counter their raids. But his voice trailed off, his claws tapping rhythmically against the stone table. You're not so sure, Elena finished. Vrazdar finally turned to face her, his golden eyes piercing. The cub learned to think beyond instinct because of you. I am not blind to the potential of your strategies, but strategy alone will not win battles. If you believe in your methods, prove them to me on the battlefield. Elena felt the weight of his challenge but didn't falter. What do you have in mind? The next morning, Elena stood at the edge of a dense jungle near the Kzarran Scraith border. She had been given command of a small Kzarran scouting unit, including Jatar, who was eager to prove itself again. The mission was straightforward. Locate and neutralize a Scraith raiding party before they could reach a nearby settlement. Her Kzarran unit was skeptical of her leadership. Humans do not fight like us, one warrior grumbled as they moved through the underbrush. You rely on tools and cleverness, not strength. Tools and cleverness kept me alive this long, Elena replied evenly. Now keep your voice down, or the Scraith will hear us before we're ready. When they found the raiders, Elena's plan unfolded with precision. Using traps and diversions, she disrupted the Scraith's formation, forcing them into smaller, vulnerable groups. Jatar, now more confident in its abilities, played a key role in luring the Scraith into the ambushes. The Kzarran warriors, initially hesitant to follow her lead, soon realized the effectiveness of her approach. By the end of the skirmish, the raiders were defeated with minimal losses. As the team regrouped, Vrazdar emerged from the shadows, having observed the entire operation. You fought well, he said, his tone begrudging but respectful. And you did so without sacrificing strength or honor. Elena nodded, exhaustion creeping into her voice. It's not about replacing your traditions. It's about adapting them, combining the best of both worlds. Vrazdar studied her for a long moment before extending a clawed hand. Perhaps there is more to your species than I first believed. Let this victory be the first step toward something greater. As Elena shook his hand, she felt the weight of a new alliance solidify. Trust, once fragile, had taken root. And in Jatar's proud gaze, she saw the future of two species working together, stronger than either could be alone.